The last kind of texture that I want to talk about is called environment. An environment can be a little bit confusing because there's a set of environment properties, which is not an environment material, and then there's an environment material texture. We're going to limit ourselves to talking only about the texture in this lesson. I'll talk about the environment properties in a separate chapter. So to follow along, go to Photoshop and start that up. Let's create a new document, File New. Okay. And let's make a new 3D object. This time we're going to make a donut. So go over here, click on that panel, Mesh from Presets, and pick Donuts, aka Torus. I'm going to pull down the ground plane a bit here just like that so you can see a little better. All right, I want to talk about the environment. Now, let's take a look first over at the 3D panel. And there's an environment property group there. We are not talking about these properties in this lesson, but it can be awfully confusing because here's environment. Then you go to donut material, and then here's environment down here. What's the difference? Well, plenty. If I go back to this environment group of properties, we've got all kinds of things here. You've got what's called a global ambient, which is the color of the scene, an image-based light, which is a light that actually shines in the scene. Right now it's black. You can sort of change a little bit here. You can see the intensity changes, but it's a black light. There's a shadow associated with the image-based light. It's also the ground plane characteristics in terms of shadows and reflections. And you can add a background to the whole scene if you want to, as opposed to putting in a layer that's a background that doesn't really interact with the objects. This background does interact with the objects. So this stuff all happens inside the environment panel here, which we're not dealing with in this lesson. Instead, we're going over here to the donut material, and down here in the lower right-hand corner is the environment texture file. Now right now it's empty, so there's nothing going on. What environment amounts to in this case is like a giant globe in which the object resides. And you know how when you're in, let's say, a red room when the walls are all red or something like that, then the red color seems to reflect off individuals and objects in the room. It lends some color to those objects. Well, that's what the environment is. It's like a giant globe or walls around the object that give the object some color and also some definition if the object has some detail to it. Let's just start off by making a new object environment texture file. Just click on this and go New Texture. Then you get this little panel here, you click OK. And now it has a texture file, but now you need to edit it. So go over here and click it again and edit the texture. And let's do something with this and see what happens. So I'm going to put these guys side by side. Go to Window, Arrange, 2-up vertical. And work over here. First order of business, let's just give this a color. I want to fill it with color. So I go Edit, Fill. Give it a color like any color we want. Let's say purple, for example. There you go. Click OK. It's purple. Let me close this so you can see things. When I click inside here, we'll see the difference. And it gives it this kind of purplish glow. It doesn't make it purple. It's not a diffuse. It's not a skin that you're putting on it. It's just the room that's casting this purple glow on it. Meantime, the light right here is throwing some light on it and kind of overriding the purpleness, if you want to call it that, of the room that's around it. This is a big invisible room. But in any event, that's what happens when you give this an environment and the environment has a single color like this. Let's just see what happens, though, when you turn the light off and stuff like that. I'm going to go back to the 3D panel. I'm going to turn off the light. It gets dark. That's because the light is coming from the environment over here, this image-based light. If I increase the intensity of the light over here, you see it is this purple thing going on there still. There you go. I'm going to turn the light back on here. And I'm going to move the light a little bit. So I'm going to close you down just a touch. Click on the light here. And move the light so you can see the shadow off to the side like that. And see how the light plays off this thing. It gives you that purple look there. This little line there looks like a seam, but it's not. It's actually caused by the shine. If I click on that again, look at it one more time, go over here to shine and get shine up to 100%. That makes the little specular highlight very small and that seam goes away. All right, what happens if we change this to something a little more distinct? Let's go and make this a gradient. Look over here. Click on the gradient tool. Pick this colorful gradient here. And take a look at it here and make sure that this last color is actually different. I don't want it to be the same at the moment here. I'm going to make it green or something like that right now. Click OK. Now I'm going to draw the gradient here. Go from top to bottom. Make it kind of an angle like so. Click over here and see what happens. And you can see now we're picking up the gradient as if the room had a giant gradient painted on it. And now we're seeing the gradient showing up in the surface here. Now, the more reflective the surface is, the more obvious this will look. Let's go over here to this object, click on the selection tool, click it one more time to get the material settings. Let's increase the reflection. And notice how it changes right away. This is different when you work on reflections that come to it from the floor, for example, or other objects. Here, the reflection from the room, from the environment, is changed immediately. You don't have to do a ray trace render, so let's just increase the reflection there. At some point, it's going to get blown out. The reason it's getting blown out is that the light is kind of combining with the room's reflection and making it a little bit too bright. So you can go back to the light again now and turn it off. And then you get a true reflection here as you go farther to the right, eventually going to 100%, getting an exact reflection of the room. I notice there's that seam there. Now we can't rotate this thing to make the seam go away. It's picking the seam up because the seam is in the room at that spot. If I click here, I want to rotate around, for example. Notice how the seam stays in place there. That's because we're not moving the environment, we're moving the object within the environment. We can fix that seam with gradients. If you went through the lesson about how you can fix seams and you know how to do this already, I'll just go through it briefly here. I'll click over here. What I want to do now, first of all, is have the line go straight instead of at an angle like that. So I click on the gradient tool again, up here at the top, click there, hold down the Shift key now to keep the line lined up like that. Go to the bottom, let go, click over here, seam is gone. If I draw this left to right or right to left, that'll change. Over here again, click on you and draw it from left to right. I'll hold down the Shift key, but that really won't make much difference in this case. Click over here, make the seam again, because the left side is red and the right side's green. And if you've seen this before, you know the solution. Just click over here on the gradient. We'll edit the gradient to have this last stop equal the red on the end. I'll click on it to delete it first of all. Click on this red over here, and click over here, and that adds a red of the exact same color there. So it's red here on both sides. Click OK. Now I'll drag it across over here, left to right. Click right there, hold down the Shift key, right like that. So the left side and the right side equal, and the seam goes away. And now I should take this over here, get the selection tool, rotate around it. You can see how it responds to the environment. How cool is that? Now you don't have to limit your environment texture file to just a color or a gradient. In fact, it's more likely that you'll want to use an image file because you want to place this thing in some location, and you can use that image file in an environment to make it look like it really is part of that location. Let me show you what I mean. Click on this to get its materials active. Go down to environment. Let's replace this. Go down to replace texture. I'm going to replace it with the Jungle Low Res. You can use a relatively low-res file when you're working with an environment because you're seeing it only as it shows up on an object as opposed to seeing it as a background. So I'll click on that and click Open. You can see it immediately shows up over there. Let's just take a look at that. Let's move it around a little bit. There you go. See how it responds to the environment as you move it around? Pretty cool. Now there is that little ugly seam there, unfortunately. There it is right there. We can fix that, and I've explained how to fix seams in a different lesson, so I'll just go through it really quickly here. I'll select that. I'll edit the texture by going over here and saying Edit Texture. Let's move it to the other side like this. I want to work on it, so I'm going to zoom out a bit, Controller Command minus. And now let's put the offset filter on there. So Filter, Other, Offsets. Let's offset it horizontally just a bit so we can see the seam there, okay? Now I'm going to do Content Aware Fill there where the seam is, and that'll fix that. So we go over and get the selection tool here and select that area like that. And then we'll use Content Aware Fill here, so go Edit, Fill, Content Aware Fill like that. Click OK and let it do its magic there. Maybe do a little bit of touch-up work with the Spot Healing Brush tool here, like so. Just kind of wiggle that along there, right there too, a little bit there. I think that fixed things reasonably well. Now I want to go back and return it to its original position, so I'll just do Controller Command D to undo that selection, and go back to Filter and Other and Offset. Now you don't have to do this. It tends to do things internally anyway, so just click the 0 here. And that takes care of that. Now we're going to go back over here and take a look at the results. And boom, the seam is gone. Take my selection tool here and we'll just kind of move it around a bit and see how that works. No more seam. Very cool, I think. The environment can be a lot of fun to play with when you want to give this kind of exciting looking reflection to your objects to make it look like they're in some place like that and reflecting off the place like they're glass or metal. So that's how you apply an environment texture file to an object and then edit that texture file, as opposed to working with environment properties. We'll cover the environment properties in a separate chapter.